Thank you. Well, we're going to make sure we land both feet firmly in the end zone, aren't we? I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, for our wonderful senators, Senator Klobuchar, who, in case you don't remember, which you might not, I'm sure you all do, beat Mark Kennedy in his home turf of the 6th District. And like Amy, we're going to follow in her footsteps. And Senator Al Franken, who knows something about close races. Now, my goal is to get at least 313 more votes than Congresswoman Bachmann. And with your help, we're going to do that. And Representative Keith Ellison, I know that you're here. Keith is the champion of the underdog, and he knows about what we need to be doing. Thank you all so much for being here, for showing up, for keeping up and being so much important part of what we're doing. This is it. This is where it all began. On March 27th, this is where we were endorsed on our first ballot. And Teamsters 120 want to thank you for having us back. Since then, together, we've knocked on 90,000 doors. We've made over 125,000 phone calls, and we've raised over $4 million. And none of that matters, though. None of that matters unless we do everything we can in the next 9 days. It comes down to the next 9 days. So here's my question for you. Now, you can do anything for 9 days, right? Anything for 9 days. Are you ready to go out and door knock, to talk to your neighbors, to get on the telephone, and make sure we send a strong message that we're going to stop this band of divisiveness and move our country forward? With just over a week to go, we truly are in that last quarter, and the 6th District is where it's going to be. Now, we know that every door we knock on, every phone call we make, and every neighbor that we talk to, everybody in our church, and our synagogue, and our mosque, those are the people. That's what it's about right now. Now, our country is facing a tremendous challenge, right? We're at a crossroads in a challenging time. And our families, our seniors, our veterans, our small businesses, way too many are struggling right now. Now, I hear about this every day. And just because our Congresswoman maybe isn't hearing about this, let me just tell you about 3 people really quickly that I met this week, because it's a story that we hear all over. And as I'm looking around, I know that many of you know these stories. One was Sue, a woman who has been out and doing telecommunications for 27 years in the service industry. Her job, outsourced. Another woman, Vanessa, she's been doing work in the IT, doing incredible work. What happened to her job? Outsourced. And then there was Mark, who's been doing manufacturing for the last 20 years. What's happened to his job? It was outsourced. Now, funny thing, Congresswoman Bachmann, what has she voted for on our jobs and outsourcing? Not once, not twice, not 5 times, not 10 times, 11 times she's voted with those who would outsource our jobs. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of fed up with that. It's time to be bringing our jobs back here. Now, on Friday, I was in Anoka County. I was over at the Workforce Center. And you know, that's a light day. It's a light day for people looking for jobs. So I can tell you, every single computer was full in there. People hopeful, nervous, worried, people who had recently been unemployed, people who had been trying for months, and they're fed up. Now, there was a bright spot. There was a veteran who had been working and looking for a job for many months, and he just got the job. So what did everybody do? They banged the gong, and they celebrated because someone got a job. Well, there's far too many people that aren't getting those jobs, and together we need to do something about it. Now, I think that, quite frankly, they and we have every reason to be fed up. We're fed up with a Congresswoman who at best has been absentee, a Congresswoman who time and time again has stood up with the special interests over the people of our districts, and a Congresswoman who has voted 5 times against those who have struggled to stay in their homes. So if we care about our jobs, if we care about our homes, and President Clinton and I were just talking about if you're a student, you want to be able to afford to go to school, guess what? She's going to take away all the help you just got. If you care about that, it's time to say no to her, and it's time to elect me on November 2nd. Together, we're going to do that. Now, this election and this time in our history truly is critical, but it's up to all of us, every single one of us, to be reaching out and making a difference, because we need to fix Washington, right? We need to fix it so we can get back to the job of building stronger families, stronger communities, and a stronger America. And that's what I've been doing my whole life. Now, my husband Doug and our son Nathan are here. Colin couldn't be here tonight, but I was born when my dad was serving in the Navy. My next younger brother, Scott, was as well. As a matter of fact, Scott was born when my dad was serving up in the Arctic Circle. They couldn't get any communication through. It took a week for them to get through, and finally they did. They flew my dad home so he could see his new son. And I was 13 whole months at the time. And then 2 days later, he was redeployed to the Cuban Missile Blockade. That's what our men and women are going through now. Our families are doing that. 2 of my other brothers, they also served in the Navy. It's part of the reason why I've always made sure to stand up for our men and women and their families. And it's time to stop just talking about it, but actually honoring our veterans. I also happen to have grown up in a Republican family. I'd say they were an Eisenhower Republican family. They knew a good value of $1. They knew the government didn't belong in your private business. They wanted to make sure that you were going ahead and having the infrastructure that we needed to go ahead and make sure we could move our goods and services and make sure our kids could get educated. Those are important values for me, and it certainly taught me that no one person or one party or one group has the marketplace on good ideas, that it takes all of us coming together to actually listen to each other so that we can come up with the best possible legislation. And Doug and I, we've served as youth ministers for over 20 years. I started out counseling high school teenagers that were at risk. I'm a former legal services attorney working particularly with seniors, and like the president's wife, got a chance to work with the Children's Defense Fund as well. And when I went to, it's a great place. We got to stick up for our kids. That's what it's all about. And I ran a statewide organization, so I know what it's like to run a small business and to go ahead and pinch pennies and worry about whether or not your employees can get the health care they need and deserve. And I took those lessons with me to the state Senate when we won in that special Christmas election 4.5 years ago. And I can tell you, just like we did it then when nobody thought we could, we're going to do it now. That's right, yes we can. And let's face it, I think that's why the St. Cloud Times, the papers around the district, the Star Tribune, our veterans and military, Families for Progress, our police officers, our firefighters, our teachers, our Committee to Protect Social Security, they're the ones that are standing with me. They know that we need to change. The place that Congresswoman Bachmann would have us live is not the America any of us would recognize. In it, teachers are money launderers. Making BP pay was extortion. Weaning people off of Social Security, weaning, if you're my age, you'd be weaned off of Social Security and Medicare as if we're addicted to it. In it, corporations could do whatever they please. And funding for our veterans, our seniors, our firefighters, the special projects that we need in our district, like getting North Star all the way up to St. Cloud. Because as Amy and Al know, in Minnesota, we don't do things halfway. You don't stop a train in the middle of the rail, right? So I ask you, is that what we really want for our families and our communities? Is that what we want for Minnesota? Is that what we want for America? I don't think so either. Now, I got to tell you, we do have someone up next who is living proof that things don't have to be that way. We can create jobs, and we can reduce the deficit. We can invest in education and keep taxes down for the middle class. We can work together, Republicans and independents and Democrats alike. And you know who proved that? President Bill Clinton. This might sound like a familiar story. Just a short time ago, in 1992, the deficit was growing, gridlock was pervasive in Washington, people weren't working with each other, many were struggling trying to find jobs, but with persistence and perseverance, President Clinton reached across the aisle, and he was demonized by some for doing it, and dug us out of the hole. And do we still need to be digging out of this hole? I think so. Now, he found a way, and together America found a way to put more cops on the street, keep taxes down for the middle class. We supported education and grew small businesses. We eliminated the deficit, grew jobs, and grew the economy. Now, I'm honored and honored to introduce you to the person who showed us that we can create prosperity out of hard times, and we are in the midst of doing that again. I give you President Bill Clinton.
Thank you. That was good. Really good. Thank you. Whoa. Thank you. Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to thank Tarryl for giving me another reason to come back to Minnesota. And Senator Franken, Senator Klobuchar, Governor Dayton was here earlier, and he left. He doesn't feel too well, and I told his son he needed to get well. We got an election to win here, and we can all be sick the day after the election. Congressman Ellison, thank you very much. And most of all, let's give the Teamsters a big hand for letting us come here today. Now, look, folks, this is the 104th event I have done in this election. And I did not mean to do this when I started. No, I want to be serious for a minute. I didn't mean to do it. I really like your candidate. As she pointed out, Hillary's first job getting out of law school was with the Children's Defense Fund. I identify with that. I identify with the fact that she and her husband helped bring Habitat for Humanity to Minnesota. The founders were very close friends of mine, and the founder of Habitat just died recently. I'm proud of the fact that her son works for AmeriCorps Vista. I'm very proud of that because I started AmeriCorps when I was president. And I like what she's done in the Minnesota legislature. I like the fact that she's proved you could grow jobs and improve the environment and improve education and training and still be fiscally responsible. I like all of that. And I was just thinking that if we lived in normal times, but we could bring back all the great Republicans from the past, every Republican leader from Theodore Roosevelt to Dwight Eisenhower would be voting for her in this election. I mean, this crowd in Washington, her opponent, this crowd in Washington, they make Richard Nixon look like a member of the Students for a Democratic Society. They make Newt Gingrich and George Bush look like garden variety liberals. And we're laughing, but just think about this. What do the Children's Defense Fund, Habitat for Humanity, AmeriCorps, and her service in the legislature all have in common? They reflect a belief that we are all in this together, right? That is the fundamental thing that enables us to be good Americans in every age and time. We are trying to form a more perfect union. Not this crowd. They're trying to divide us and run a bait and switch under the guise of sticking up for the taxpayer being soaked by an evil government. They're basically trying to turn America over to the powerful economic interest groups that represent yesterday's economy and are responsible for the dramatic blows the middle class has suffered over the last 30 years. And so I want to talk to you about that. I mean, it's just really funny. This whole election, like I said, I've been all over the country. It's a dueling tale of two stories. The Michelle Bachmann story goes something like this. This is what the Republicans are saying. Okay, we left you in a really big hole. But the Democrats had 21 months to get you out of it. And they failed. And they failed spending too much money and giving you too much government. And if you don't stop them right now, socialism will be around every corner. So throw them out and put us back in so we can do what we did before on steroids. Isn't that about what they're saying? That's what they're saying. Okay, now. So the Democratic retort goes something like this. I can't do as well as Franken would, but I'll try. The Democratic retort goes something like this. Yeah, we didn't get you out of the hole. It was a very deep hole. But we did what our parents taught us to do. At least we stopped digging. And we are getting out of the hole. And about all we've asked you for is to give us 2 more years. That would give us 4 years to get you out of the hole. That's half as much time as you gave the Republicans to dig it. It seems fair to us. Give us 2 years and we will prove to you we can get out of this hole. Now, in this tale of dueling stories, why did the national polls say that in most places the Republican story is prevailing? Our story is at least as persuasive as theirs. Sounds better to me. For 2 reasons. Reason number one is that there's always a gap between when you do something and people feel it. This election is occurring in the gap. I have seen this movie before in 1994. And the American people threw out the people that actually gave them the balanced budget and the surplus, or a lot of them. It's a gap election. So in a gap election, you have to think. You look at all the Republican ads. They're designed to stop you from thinking. Okay? So you got to think. Second reason is the profile of people who are expected to vote. I finally got a hold of an article about 4 days ago describing the profile, the voter profile that most states are using. And in the presidential election, 58% of the registered voters vote. They expect that to drop to 43 this time, 25% drop. That's not unrealistic. But they think that the African American vote and the Latino vote will drop between 35 and 40%. And they believe that the youth vote will drop 55% from 2008. So if you want your story to prevail, we got to go out and explain to people who have bought the line that it is the Democrats who are the big spenders and are causing all these troubles, what the facts are. In other words, get people to think in the gap. And you have to swell the vote. So here's my take on this election. I spend an hour a day studying this economy still, even though my real life is with my foundation. And I want you to just think about these things. So we just watched this football game, right? And don't be discouraged. They got a lot of great players. They're going to have a good season. You hadn't watched. The Vikings will do very well this season. They're still getting used to playing with each other. It's going to be fine. I've been a Viking fan since Alan Page was an all-pro before he ever got a college degree. So I know about this. But look, what turned the game? The replay, right? We are so obsessed with factual accuracy in football, we replay the plays, right? The facts really matter to us. Tomorrow, there'll be hundreds of thousands of people in Minnesota who will be able to go through this exciting football game in excruciating detail, and nobody can make a mistake, right? You'll all stand like Einstein and Fermi debating theoretical physics. That's right, isn't it? When something really matters to us, the facts are really important. But when something is of no consequence whatever, like the future of our children, what happens to our economy, whether we can regain our world leadership in it, what America looks like in the future, we elect people like our opponent to say, don't think. You know how you feel. Don't bother me with the facts. Now, you're being quiet because you know I'm telling the truth, don't you? It's true, isn't it? So how did we ever get so obsessed with the facts with something that, as important as it is not nearly as important as the future of this economy, the future of our children? Why don't we know these things? If you want her to win, you got to spend the next week making sure there are some things people know. Now, so I really believe, look, I could sit up here and crack jokes about the Tea Party stuff and everything, but it's not worth doing. The only thing that matters is where are we now, what are we going to do, who's more likely to do it. The rest of it's all background music. Where are we now? Suppose that we're football, we're looking at a game film. Compared to the pit of the recession, which happened about July 1st last year, nothing steams me more than to hear the Republicans act like President Obama is responsible for everything that happened from the minute he took his hand off the Bible. The economic crash occurred in September, 4 months before he took the oath of office. I'd like to see any of them get behind a locomotive going 200 miles an hour straight downhill and stop it in 10 seconds. You can't do that. Nobody can do that. But anyway, so since that happened, we have recovered 70% of our lost income, our lost gross domestic product. So wait. So how's the competition doing? Germany, 60%, Japan, 50%, Great Britain, 30%. Now, this is not cause for applause, but it should give everybody pause before they throw this crowd out, reject the Democrats, and give the Congress to the Republicans. They ought to really think about that. We're doing better than the competition. Okay, what should we do now? We need jobs. We need to finance the jobs. We need to make sure people are educated and trained for jobs. And we've got to do something about the debt long term. So who's more likely to do it? You got it, but why? Let's go through the facts. Look at her record on jobs in the legislature. What she has done for small business, to support clean energy, to support manufacturing. I can tell you the job growth in America is going to come from small business, clean energy, technology, manufacturing, and infrastructure. Now, her opponent's position is to actually say that the stimulus was a waste of money and we should repeal the rest of it because it didn't get us out of the hole. Well, that's not true. The stimulus, first of all, was designed mostly to let us swim and not drown in the hole. And she didn't like it because it gave 100 million ordinary families a little tax cut so they could still go buy food at the grocery store instead of the wealthiest Americans like me. She didn't like it because it enables states to avoid laying off 1 million teachers and healthcare workers. That's swimming in the hole. A third of the money, about $270 billion in a $3 trillion hole, was designed to create jobs. The money that's been spent has been analyzed by large numbers, repeatedly analyzed by experts, and every group has said it created more jobs than they thought it would, that the swimming around money saved 1 million jobs, that the stimulus created 2 million more, that the unemployment rate is 2% lower than it would be had it not been for the stimulus. And her position is repeal the rest, cancel all the contracts, cost the country hundreds of thousands of jobs, and cost us our leadership in the race for a clean energy future with the rest of the world. She is right, her opponent is wrong. You've got to be for Tarryl Clark on the jobs issue. Now, you got to finance the jobs. You got to finance the jobs. There's plenty of money there. The banks have been saved. They now have $1.8 trillion in cash, uncommitted to loans, and they're going to pay back 92% of that TARP money. You may get it all back, but you're sure going to get 92% of it back. They got all this money. It's time for them to loan it. How are you going to get them to loan it if they're scared about the economy? She has a record in the Minnesota legislature of doing things to make small business more attractive for loans. The Democrats have supported loan guarantees, credits, tax credits for creating new jobs, for small business, for green energy, for manufacturing. The Republicans are against all that. They say all that matters is that you make permanent to temporary tax cuts for the wealthiest 2% of us. That's $700 billion, more than $600 billion for people that made more than $1 million, almost $500 billion for people that made over $2 million. Now, I love saying this. I never had a nickel till I got out of the White House. I'm in that group. I ought to be for her opponent, but it's a lousy idea. And I'll tell you why. Forget about, even if you don't care about the economic justice aspects of it, look at the cold hard economics. The most inefficient thing you can do is to give people who already have a lot of disposable income more of it, because they will not spend it all. It is far more efficient to give the money to small business, to green energy, to manufacturing, to young people to go to college, to workers to get trained for new jobs. That will grow the economy. She is right. Her opponent is wrong. If you want to finance these things, you got to do it. Now, in addition to repealing the stimulus, the leadership of the Republican Party has promised to repeal Wall Street reform. Now, that ought to bother you for this reason. Wall Street reform, that bill did a lot of good. It saved people from being abused in credit cards and debit cards and saves consumers $5 billion. But here's the most important thing that Wall Street reform bill did, that the Democrats passed. The Republicans are committed to repealing it. It says these big banks that caused not the community banks, they didn't do anything wrong, the big banks caused this crash. And they did it because they loaned too much money and had too little money to back it up. Average bank makes $10 of loans for every dollar in deposits you put in. They were up to 30, 34 or more. So this bill says they will be monitored constantly, and whenever their risk gets too high, they'll have to set aside more cash to prevent future crashes. And it says if you get around us and there is a new crash, they both voted for it. Your senators did. It says if they get around it, this time there will be no bailout. The shareholders and the executives of these big banks will have to pay all the cost of their next failure. Now, that's what it says. Now, most Americans don't know they passed this law, do they? They don't know what's in it. I'm just telling you what's in it. That's what's in it. It makes another crash almost impossible. And in the unlikely event it happens, it makes the shareholders and the executives eat the cost. No more bailouts. So, wait. What is the position of the Republican leadership and her opponent? To repeal the law, make another crash more likely, and make a bailout more likely. So they can say all they want about being against bailouts. They are determined to put us through the same risk again. And the most important thing is that will reduce the incentive these banks have to invest the old-fashioned way in new factories, new businesses, new clean energy, and instead encourage them to go back to gambling. So if you want to finance the right kind of modern economy for Minnesota, you don't have a choice. You got to support Tarryl Clark for Congress. You've got to do that. Now, here's the third thing. Because this state has such a great history of education, you will probably find this surprising. But in America today, there are 3 million jobs that have been vacant for a month or more. That is, people are trying to hire. This has never happened to us before coming out of a recession. And there are a couple reasons. The little reason is more than 10 million of us live in homes that are worth less than our mortgages, so we can't move. Our credit's toast for a decade. And when you undermine labor mobility, it's harder to fill jobs. The other thing is, in the previous 8 years, they cut back on a lot of this training investment. So she's got a whole history in workforce development and education and training that starts at preschool and goes all the way. This is really important. The Republican budget, the one put out by Mr. Ryan from Wisconsin, their budget spokesman, and the one even worse put out in their Pledge to America, will cut all education funding at least 25%. That's the most liberal position they have. Some of them want to get rid of the Department of Education altogether. So we ought to be able to give Minnesota and every other state a list every month of every job that's been vacant for a month or more, and a check and say, here's the money to train these people. Give it to a union training program, give it to a community college, give it to an employer. But for God's sakes, train them and hire them and get the unemployment rate down 2% right now. Do it now. But if you want that, you don't have a choice. You have to support her for Congress. You've got to support Tarryl for Congress. That's what this election's about, not all this other stuff. Now, here's the most important thing. She referred to it. The Congress passed and the President signed the most far-reaching effort to increase access to college and make it affordable since the GI Bill. And I want to explain what it does. The bill increases Pell Grants, it increases tax credits for college tuition, but the most important thing it does is to revolutionize the student loan program by making a national program out of what I made optional for all the colleges when I was president, and then it was dropped in the Bush administration. And here's what it does. Instead of the federal government paying big subsidies to banks to make college loans, it makes the loans direct to the schools and they give it to the students. And you set aside a little loan reserve for the students that don't repay. This lowers the cost of the loans. When I did it, the average student saved $1,300 for every $10,000 they had to repay. More important, listen to this. For the first time in the history of this country, every student can pay the loan back as a small percentage of their income for up to 20 years. Never more than 10% a year, and less if they take lower paying jobs. Now, if you don't have a child in college or you're not in college, why should you care about that? Because in this decade, for the first time since World War II and the passage of the GI Bill, the United States of America fell from first to ninth in the percentage of our adult population with 4-year degrees, and among young adults, we fell to 12th. This is a recipe for economic disaster. And here's the interesting thing. We are still first in the percentage of our young people going to college. They don't finish because they think, oh my God, I cannot take out another loan. I will never be able to pay my loan. My family's in terrible trouble economically. Don't you see what this means? Nobody will ever have to drop out of college again. Not ever, ever in America. We will go back to number one. And it actually cuts the debt by $60 billion because we're saving the subsidies, and there'll be a far lower default rate as young people can afford to repay the loans. So what do the Republicans want to do? The leadership of the Republican Party has promised to repeal this bill. If they can't get it in budget cuts by 25%, they want to repeal the bill. Why? Why would the Republican Party take this position? Vote Republican. We'll make it more expensive to go to college and harder to repay your loan, and we'll increase the debt by $60 billion. Because the people that got that $60 billion of subsidies want their money back, even if we go to 20th or 50th in the world in the percentage of our people with college degrees. If you want to stand up for the children of this country, the future of this country, the economic supremacy that we hope to regain, you have got to vote for Tarryl Clark for Congress. That's what this is about. And let me tell you something. There are a lot of young people in this crowd, and you're more politically active or you would not be here. And I still venture to, I would be shocked if 25% of the students in this crowd knew what was in that student loan bill, and if 25% of that 25% knew that the Republicans had promised to repeal it. So when you leave here, I'm going to ask you to do something. This won't cost any money, and it can elect her. I want you to get on any social network you have. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, you name it. Just email your friends. Do something to make sure every single solitary soul in every institution of higher education in this district knows what's in the student loan reform and knows the Republican leaders have promised to repeal it. If you do, you can increase the vote. Remember what I told you about the youth vote. You could increase the youth vote by 2,000 to 10,000 in the next week at no cost, and it will change the future. She will certainly win this election if you do that. You can do it. Will you do that? Will you do that? All right, now the final thing, we got to have a little fun with this. I've been listening to this bait and switch for 30 years. You know what that means, don't you? That's not just a country saying. They've been telling us for 30 years how they just hate government spending, they hate these deficits, and they just are always for a constitutional amendment to balance the budget, and the Democrats are big spenders, and you've heard it all. Unfortunately, we're looking at this tonight like the replay of that touchdown. So we have to look at the picture. The picture is different from the ads on television. In the 12 years before I became president, there were 2 Republican presidents. They quadrupled the debt of America from $1 to $4 trillion. It was the first time in the history of the United States we ever built a long-term structural deficit. And they did it deliberately. President Reagan's budget man, David Stockman, who found religion late in life, and I loved it. Being a Baptist, I believe in deathbed conversions. And old David Stockman's been a great American. I'm serious. He's gone around saying, we did it because we were trying to break the federal government so we could cut all the taxes we could for the people that were helping us. We didn't really give a rip what happened to the deficit. So we got in the habit of borrowing money. A lot of middle-class people went along with it because middle-class income started to drop. Manufacturing jobs started to shrink. So they bought off a lot of our crowd by giving them the crumbs off the table of the tax cut bonanza. And it was like telling your kid that he or she can eat all the candy that they want and they'll never have to go to the dentist. So finally, we ran up against the brick wall, interest rates got real high, and you elected me president. And wait. So the Congress adopted a new budget. We reversed trickle-down economics. It got rid of 90% of the deficit before the Republicans won the Congress, but they had to run in 1994 in the gap, the same gap we're in now. Except now we know better, we Democrats, and we're out here telling you what happened. I gave you 4 surplus budgets, paid $600 billion down on the debt, left President Bush a $230 billion surplus. We would have been out of debt for the first time since Andrew Jackson was president in 1832 by 2015 if they had kept the basic budget structure. But then they won in 2009. It's not about me. They won in 2001. Listen, they won in 2001. What is the first thing they did, these people who hate all this government spending? They repealed arithmetic. They did. They had the whole shebang, remember? The White House and the Congress, they repealed the pay-as-you-go rule, which basically says if you want to do something new, unless there is a total recession like we've been in, or a dramatic national emergency, you got to pay for what you do. You either have to go raise more money or stop doing something else. So in my second term, I wanted more kids in after-school programs. They were having trouble. We needed that. We put 1.6 million kids in after-school programs, but I paid for it by stopping other things to put it into our future. That's what gave us this good budget. They got rid of it. So then what did they do? Before the crash, they doubled the debt of the country. Before the crash. And did it work? No. They kept telling us, max out your credit cards. Take those subprime mortgages because we need to grow jobs and housing. And let Wall Street do whatever they wanted because we were getting growth there. But growth went to a very few people. What happened? In the decade before the crash, 90% of the gains went to 10% of us at the top, 40% to the top 1%. You can't run a country that way. We were ready for the fall. Then the crash occurred. When President Obama took the oath of office, the annual deficit was already $1.2 trillion, and these people tell us they are the party of fiscal rectitude. Give me a break. So, all I know, and small government, they say they're party of small government. Here are the facts. The budget was in surplus 4 times in a row in my second term for the first time in 70 years. We had the smallest government since 1960, Dwight Eisenhower's last year in office, and I didn't let anybody go. All we did was use technology and ratchet it down, increase productivity and use technology, so we could put more money into the future. And we had 22.7 million new jobs in 8 years, which was more jobs than in the previous 12 years and the subsequent 8 years before the crash combined. Our ideas work better than theirs do. Let's look at the game film. Let's replay these scoring plays. Let's do what happened tonight. I'm telling you, folks, if you want this, if she's been a state legislator, she knows you got to make the numbers work. But you can't go out and cancel the stimulus now when we're not out of the hole. All the jobs are in the other 30% are getting out of the hole, and then when we go on into the future. We got a commission going to make a report. The Democrats have already voted to go back to pay as you go. There are lots of ideas to follow a lot of what's being done in Minnesota to lower the cost of health inflation in the future. We'll get there, but we will not get there by promising to give Social Security to Wall Street and Medicare to the health insurance companies and increase defense all we want and try to cut everything else. The numbers don't work. Every conservative group, even the pro-Republican groups that have looked at their budgets, say they are a hoax. The closest one, the Ryan budget, adds $1 trillion to the debt and gives 117% of its tax cuts to 5% of us at the top. That's right, you heard me, 170%. In other words, the other 95% of the people get a tax increase to increase the debt $1 trillion. The one in their pledge increases the debt $3 trillion. Don't be played. This is bait and switch, bait and switch, bait and switch. This is not about small government. It is not about balanced budgets. It's about turning the future of America over to these big, special corporate interests. Stand up and say, no, you want a middle-class future back. You want a future for our children back. You want Tarryl Clark in Congress. Now look. Ordinarily, this close to the election, I wouldn't go into this kind of detail, but I'm telling you, there are any number of voters you can still turn. But you got to explain this to them. All that matters is where are we, what are we going to do, who's going to do it. If you ask that, you come up with her name every single solitary time if you are looking at the facts. You should be proud that she has fought this long campaign. When she started this campaign, most people thought it was a fool's errand. She trusted the people of her congressional district to have good sense if they got an honest, clear alternative. She has gone out there and worked her heart out. You have to be her voice. You have to be her advocate. You have to carry the facts. And the young people have to get on the viral networks and light them up and tell them about this student loan thing, and you will win this election. Thank you, and God bless you.